possible ceasefire in Ukraine is becoming increasingly likely. Russian declarations are being approached by both Kiev and Washington with caution, but significant progress appears to have been made over the past week. After today's video summit, the UK Prime Minister called for more pressure on Moscow and to begin preparations for a possible stabilization mission in Ukraine. Kiev has officially confirmed Ukrainian forces are leaving the Kursk region. Suja is in Russian hands. According to Western media, the retreat was not an accident or the result of significant Russian superiority, but a conscious decision by the Ukrainian command in the face of negotiations with Washington. Our teams worked very well at the meeting in Saudi Arabia, and we are in contact with the American side. We Ukrainians are very constructive, and it is important to urge Russia to be constructive in order to end all this Russian manipulation, which can only prolong the war. Despite skepticism in Kiev and a number of Western capitals, Putin is making gestures to convince the world that he is ready for a ceasefire, although he is setting conditions that may be hard for both Ukraine and the United States to accept. The talks are showing progress, however, at least in the eyes of the Americans.
We've had some very good calls today with Russia. And with Ukraine, they've agreed for a ceasefire if we can get it with Russia. And it's not easy. It's a tough one. But I think we're doing it.
American diplomacy is working behind the scenes. It's not clear what's on the table today and what the terms of both sides are. Aside from general issues of occupied territories or military support, the specifics are discussed behind closed doors.
I think there is reason to be cautiously optimistic, but by the same token, we continue to recognize this is a difficult and complex situation. It will not be easy, it will not be simple, but we certainly feel like we're at least some steps closer to ending this war and bringing peace, but it's still a long journey. It's a journey of many steps.
Slip-ups could lead to the failure of negotiations in general. As analysts point out, the main problem today is scale, the war, the losses, the resistance, and the fierceness of the soldiers, all of which on a front more than 3,000 kilometers long will affect the compliance with the ceasefire of both sides. On the other hand, however, it is clear from the actions of both Kiev and London that a possible truce is in play. Ukraine is preparing a team to develop rules for ceasefire compliance. We have already begun to form a national team that will develop appropriate procedures to properly monitor a possible ceasefire.
Good morning, colleagues.
At the same time, at the European level, a so-called coalition of the willing, that is, countries that would send their troops to Ukraine as stabilization missions, is being discussed. Great Britain is leading the building of this group.
Now is the time to engage in discussion on a mechanism to manage and monitor a full ceasefire and agree to serious negotiations towards not just a pause, but a lasting peace, backed by strong security arrangements through our coalition of the willing.
The problem is that these are demands that Moscow firmly rejects by unequivocally excluding Europe from talks on Ukraine's future. This, in turn, is an aspect that Kiev and, with high probability, Washington will not accept. The United States has unequivocally pointed precisely to Europe as guarantors of Ukraine's security. The Polish border guard is speaking out. Migrants are being brought into Poland straight from Germany. Also, potentially dangerous migrants. Foreigners transferred by German services to Poland under the Dublin Agreements and readmission agreements are being picked up by officers at designated locations on both sides of the border, including at joint Polish-German facilities, including those on the German side of the border. Last year alone, officers at the border guard post in Szczecin received 260 people. There, however, the number of migrants was expected to increase significantly from the new year. On the other hand, the Oder branch of the border guard received 507 people during the year. It is not known what the figure is nationwide. because the government is silent on the matter. And it could be thousands of people because this practice has been going on for months. The most disgraceful thing is that as part of the scam by Tusk, Polish border services are being used for this, who are apparently tasked in order to bring these migrants from the German side to Poland. This is disgraceful. This is fraud. A fraud because there were words of assurance from Prime Minister Donald Tusk and his deputy Rafał Trzaskowski. We will not pay for anything. We will not have to accept any migrants. There will be no relocation of any migrants to Poland. And yet, migrants are coming to Poland. What's more, they are being brought in by Polish services. In addition, starting next year, the Migration Pact, which applies to all European Union member states, including Poland, will inevitably come into force. So in the name of so-called solidarity, we will accept illegal immigrants or pay 20,000 euros for each migrant who is not accepted. Often, these are the people who are responsible for the rising crime wave in Western Europe today. Such protests have not been seen in Serbia for decades. Tens of thousands of people are taking part in mass anti-government demonstrations in downtown Belgrade to express their opposition to the policies of Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić. A tragedy was imminent when a car drove into a group of demonstrators in one of the neighborhoods, injuring 3 people. Nationwide demonstrations and mass protests have been going on in Serbia for months. They were sparked by the tragedy in Novi Sad. In early November 2024, 15 people were killed when the roof of a train station in that city collapsed. Demonstrators blame the authorities for the corruption and negligence that led to the accident. I believe that after this, people will be more aware of what's going on in the country, and I hope we can reach out to people, that everything will be fine, and that we will return to normalcy. They are also demanding the disclosure of all contracts related to the renovation of the Novi Sad train station, the dismissal of charges against protesters, and a 20% increase in budget spending on higher education. We expect this society to finally be free, as we have been trapped for decades in lies, crimes, corruption, and injustice. Authorities expect up to 80,000 protesters to arrive in the capital. Organizers of the protests are talking about double that number. Those who are dissatisfied with government policies have been gathering on the streets of Belgrade since morning. Students have been joined by farmers and even groups of motorcyclists. Today we are demonstrating our opposition. Today we are showing what we are striving for: a normal state under the rule of law, without corruption, lies, pressure on the media, persecution, expulsions, and unjust sentences. The government and the Serbian president assure that the protests are pointless because the demands have been met or will be met soon. The students respond that so far, none have been fulfilled completely, and that is why they are continuing the protest, which is being joined by a growing part of the population.
Ignition, and go SpaceX, go NASA Crew 10.
Space rescue mission. Elon Musk sends a space cap to pick up astronauts. Internet users are competing against each other in commenting on the American billionaire's next feat. Last night, a rocket lent by him lifted off a capsule with a NASA crew that is on its way to the International Space Station to pick up the astronauts who are waiting to return home.
It was a spectacular launch. Really happy to have the crew on their way to the International Space Station and looking forward to seeing their happy faces on board very soon. As is mentioned, they'll dock tomorrow night, 11:30 p.m. Eastern Time, to the forward port of the International Space Station. We're going to have a short handover with the Crew 9 guys coming home no earlier than Wednesday at this point. Of course, we'll be looking for good weather. It might be later than Wednesday when they come home. We're trying to keep the handover shorter because recently and last year we've had some handovers that were more extended waiting on good weather, and so we don't want to lose any good opportunities that we might have in this case. We're trying to stretch the consumables, we'd rather have less of an overlap of the crews in this particular situation.
The Falcon 9 rocket lifted the Dragon capsule into orbit and then returned to Florida. The capsule will soon reach the International Space Station, leave a new crew there and take this crew, which has been waiting to come back to Earth. Elon Musk wrote the following on the X portal. Rockets are beautiful, but the billionaire's gesture is also beautiful, thanks to which the astronauts will return home.
We're excited to get Crew 9 back, and I know Butch and Sonny are excited to come back. And then we'll celebrate.
Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams flew to the International Space Station for a few days and were stuck for months. Their Boeing Starliner capsule had problems with its propulsion system. Returning to Earth was too risky, so they stayed in space and showed internet users their lives while waiting for rescue. And here we must admit, Sunita's hairstyle has become a real internet sensation.
My hair stands up even if I'm upside down or upside right.
The astronauts had a lot of very important activities during the extended mission.
Here we're always doing experiments or maintenance or whatever, but having been up here for a while, you get a little bit more time to enjoy the view out the window. You get a little more time to adapt to space. You get a little more time to actually talk to people on the ground and bring them along and have them understand exactly what we're doing.
Astronauts admit that the hardest thing about space is missing their loved ones. Butch's return is awaited by his teenage daughter, among other family members.
My daughter has really learned a lot, and she is tough. And it does make your heart feel kind of good when your daughter says, you know, Dad, I didn't know how much I needed you until you were gone. So that's something that, that makes you feel good as a dad.
Families are waiting for the happy return of the astronauts, and Elon Musk is already announcing another space hit. Within a year, he wants to send a rocket to Mars. On board will be a humanoid robot.
Elon's all about going to Mars. He has been since he started SpaceX and before that, right? So it doesn't surprise me that he wants to focus on that. That excites me too.
Oh, I love it and I hate it at the same time.
After years of trials and failures, failed launches and rockets exploding in the air, Elon Musk has learned a lot from his mistakes, and he never gave up. Now he is closer than ever to sending a manned mission to Mars. As he wrote on the X portal, if the attempt succeeds, humans could reach the red planet as early as 2029 or 2031.